Have you ever fired off like an emotional text that you just immediately, and I mean instantly regretted?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the second your thumb hits send.
Right. Your stomach just completely drops, or, maybe you've poured your heart out, venting to the wrong person at
And
work.
then it just blows up in your face a week later.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have all been there. It is just this universal human experience.
Yeah, you get that instant realization that you just can't unring the bell. You've given away your power, and now you have to navigate the fallout.
Exactly. And you'd think with all our modern communication tools, we'd be better at this by now.
You really would think so. But today, we are taking a deep dive into a set of sources that pretty much proves human nature hasn't changed in thousands of years.
Not even a little bit.
No. We're looking at some seriously ancient wisdom today. Specifically, Proverbs chapter 25.
Right? And these are proverbs originally attributed to Solomon, and our sources note this, they were actually copied out centuries later by the men of Hezekiah, who was the king of Judah.
Yeah, and we've also got a modern application guide that pairs really perfectly with this ancient text.
The sheer survival power of these sayings is just remarkable to me. I mean, they were preserved by ancient scholars because they recognized that this wasn't just like abstract philosophy.
It's super practical.
Highly practical.
Yeah.
It's boots on the ground guidance for dealing with the actual friction of everyday human relationships.
Which we all need. So our mission for this deep dive is twofold. First, we are going to extract these ancient nuggets of wisdom and map them directly onto our chaotic, hyper-connected modern lives.
Right, looking at how to handle workplace drama, toxic positivity, online outrage, all of that.
Exactly. And then, once we've laid that practical groundwork, we are going to elevate the conversation. We want to discover how applying these specific rules of restraint can radically strengthen our trust and, ultimately, our relationship with God.
And to get to that spiritual trust, we really have to start with our own internal posture.
Makes sense.
Because before we can interact wisely with anyone else, we have to examine how we seek the truth and, well, how we view our own importance. I mean, we live in an era that rewards the fastest reaction.
Oh, for sure. The hottest take usually gets the most attention online.
Always. Which makes the very first proverb in this chapter so compelling, because it establishes a completely different metric for success.
Right. The text says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter."
It creates this beautiful hierarchy of knowledge. You have God, who in his sovereignty holds the mysteries of the universe. But the leader, the king, is tasked with the grueling, honorable work of actual investigation.
Which is so interesting.
It is. And the text follows this up with a fascinating metallurgical metaphor. It talks about taking away the dross from the silver so the finer has a vessel.
Wait, dross? Like the impurities?
Yeah, exactly. In ancient times, silver naturally bound with lead and copper, that's the dross. And you couldn't just brush it off. You had to apply intense, careful heat to separate those impurities before you actually had a foundation for something valuable.
So applying that to leadership, or even just like our everyday decisions, the dross represents our cognitive biases, right? Or the gossip we hear, or just plain bad data.
Precisely. You have to burn that away.
Which is wild because we usually picture ancient kings as these impulsive autocrats who just point a finger and say, off with their head.
Right. Total dictators.
Yeah. But here, the honor of kings is actually being compared to like a modern investigative journalist or a research scientist.
Yeah.
Isn't it fascinating that ancient kings were expected to be these careful investigators?
It really challenges our fundamental assumptions about power. True authority doesn't mean having an immediate answer. It means having the discipline to ask the right questions. Careful investigation prevents those catastrophic decisions.
But that posture, that investigation, requires a massive amount of personal humility, which the text actually immediately addresses.
It does. It warns, "Put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men."
Basically, don't invite yourself to the VIP table.
Yes, exactly.
Hey.
Because, as the proverb points out, it is so much better to be invited up to be told, "Come up hither," than to be publicly demoted and embarrassed in front of everyone.
Oh, the secondhand embarrassment of that. But in our modern professional settings, we're constantly told to build our personal brand. We're told that if we don't aggressively broadcast our achievements, we're just going to get left behind.
Well, the psychological mechanism the proverb exposes here is resistance. When you demand recognition or, forcefully elevate yourself, you trigger skepticism.
Oh, people get defensive.
Right, defensiveness in the people around you, they instinctively want to push you back down. But when you allow your diligence and your character to create a sort of vacuum of space that others feel compelled to fill by recognizing you, that recognition is undeniable.
It's built on a solid foundation, not just hot air.
Exactly. And this need for constant validation and immediate vindication, it leads us right into the most volatile area of our lives.
Which is how we handle conflict, right? And the words we use.
Yes. Because this chapter is heavily focused on the power of restraint in speech. It says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver.
Apples of gold in pictures of silver. That is just such a striking image.
It is. Notice how the text focuses on the aesthetics of communication. It suggests that it's not just about the factual accuracy of what you say, it's about how you package it.
So thoughtful speech is almost an art form.
Truly. Because
Right.
when you frame a difficult truth beautifully and contextually, the recipient can actually hear it without their ego just like throwing up a firewall.
Which perfectly explains the contrast it draws next. It says that boasting of a false gift, like promising things you can't deliver, is described as clouds and wind without rain.
The ultimate disappointment.
Yeah, it's like you see the storm coming, you expect the payoff for your crops, and then just nothing, just wind. But the line that really stops you in your tracks is about overcoming actual opposition. It says, "A soft tongue breaketh the bone."
And we culturally assume that force, volume, aggression, that those are the only tools capable of breaking down rigid barriers.
Right, you got to yell louder to win the argument.
Exactly. But the text argues the exact opposite. It says, by long forbearing, a prince is persuaded. When someone is aggressively opposing you, they are braced for impact.
They're ready for a fight.
Yes, their biological fight-or-flight response is fully engaged. So a soft, patient, persistent response actually disarms them. The sheer, unexpected gentleness is what penetrates and dismantles the most calcified opposition. It literally breaks the bone of their resistance.
Okay, I see the psychology there, I really do, but I have to push back a little on how this text applies to actual messy disputes today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, the text explicitly warns against rushing into conflict. It advises you to debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself and discover not a secret to another.
Right.
But in today's world of public call-outs, screenshotting receipts, online shaming this advice feels completely countercultural. When someone wrongs us, our first instinct is to vent, expose them, get the crowd on our side. How do we balance apples of gold with just wanting to defend ourselves?
I mean, the modern craving for crowd validation is incredibly powerful, but the ancient wisdom provides a really stark warning about collateral damage here.
What kind of damage?
It warns that if you expose someone else's secret, the person hearing it will put you to shame, and your infamy won't turn away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you drag a private dispute into the public square, you aren't just damaging your opponent. You are signaling to everyone watching that you are fundamentally unsafe.
Because if you'll air that person's dirty laundry online, you'll air mine.
Precisely. Escalating things emotionally online might give you a dopamine hit for, 5 seconds. But private debate allows the other person to save face, making resolution actually possible. Protecting their dignity ultimately protects your own integrity.
Which requires massive emotional restraint. And that restraint extends beyond just arguments, doesn't it? It's about the everyday boundaries we maintain with the people around us.
It is, and the text uses a very physical, visceral analogy to explain social boundaries. It asks, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith, and vomit it."
Yes, yeah. It maps the physical sensation of nausea directly onto, social fatigue.
It really does, because the very next line applies it directly to relationships. "Withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house, lest he be weary of thee and so hate thee."
Don't overstay your welcome.
Exactly. It's a brilliant observation that even positive things like honey or a really good friendship, they become toxic when we lack the discipline to moderate them. Overconsuming ruins the social contract of hospitality.
It's basically the ancient equivalent of learning to read the room.
Yes.
And, if overstepping boundaries breaks one kind of social contract, failing to show up breaks another entirely. The text highlights how wonderful a faithful messenger is. It compares them to the refreshing cold of snow in the time of harvest.
Such a huge relief.
Right. But then it describes the unreliable person. It says, confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint.
It's a structural failure. Think about it. When you step on a dislocated foot or you bite down on a broken tooth, there is a sharp foundational pain. You realize the very thing you relied on to support your weight has just given away.
That is such a specific, jarring feeling.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what it feels like when you rely on a flaky coworker for a major project.
Oh, completely.
You're just afraid to put any weight on them because you know it's going to hurt you in the end.
And the text goes even further to describe emotional structural failure, specifically how we handle the grief of others. It says that singing songs to a heavy heart is like taking away a garment in cold weather or pouring vinegar upon niter.
Okay, I need a breakdown of that chemistry, because taking away a coat in the winter is obviously cruel. But what is vinegar on niter?
So niter, in the ancient world, was an alkaline substance. It was often used as a cleansing agent.
Okay.
And vinegar is, of course, highly acidic. When you combine them, a violent chemical reaction occurs. It aggressively fizzes, it foams, and it actually breaks down the structure of the niter.
Oh, wow. That is the absolute perfect description of toxic positivity.
Isn't it?
Yeah. When someone is going through a tragedy and you just bounce in saying, everything happens for a reason, or just look on the bright side, you aren't helping. You are literally pouring acid on an alkaline spirit.
Exactly. It causes a painful, reactive foaming in their soul. It completely lacks empathy and actively destroys their emotional structure. It's a profound failure to bear witness to someone's reality.
And dealing with friends or neighbors is one thing, but the ultimate test of all this restraint, the true crucible, is how we treat our enemies, and ultimately how we govern our own internal impulses.
Right. The text advocates for radical, unexpected provision. It says, if your enemy is hungry, give them bread. If they are thirsty, give them water.
But it doesn't stop at just feeding them. It includes this incredibly jarring phrase. It says, by doing this, you will heap coals of fire upon his head.
Right.
Wait, heaping coals of fire? That sounds like a medieval torture trap. Or revenge? How does violently burning someone fit with the wisdom of restraint?
I know, to our modern ears, it absolutely sounds like revenge.
Yeah.
But in the cultural context of the ancient Near East, it's a metaphor for inducing a burning sense of shame and conviction.
Okay, explain that.
Well, think about the psychology of hostility. Your enemy expects you to strike back. They are fully armored against your anger. But by offering unmerited kindness, literally keeping them alive with food and water, you bypass their armor entirely.
Oh, you short-circuit their expectations.
Exactly. The warmth of your unexpected generosity melts their hostility and forces them to confront their own wrongdoing. You aren't destroying the person. You are destroying the enmity between you. You are killing the conflict.
That is a total paradigm shift, and it takes an ironclad grip on your own emotions to execute something like that.
It really does.
Which brings us to the ultimate warning in this chapter regarding self-control. It says, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls.
And ancient cities depended entirely on their walls for survival. Without them, you were constantly vulnerable to raiding parties, wild animals, total destruction. You had no safe harbor.
The modern parallel there is just chilling. A lack of emotional control leaves your career, your relationships, and your peace of mind utterly vulnerable.
Really?
I mean, a single burst of unfiltered anger, one regrettable text message, or a public meltdown leaves the gates wide open. You just invite total chaos into your life.
You really do. And, we spent a lot of time mapping these ancient rules to our modern chaos today. We've looked at the psychology of communication, boundaries, conflicts.
Yeah.
But if we stop here, we treat Proverbs 25 as just a brilliant ancient etiquette manual.
Right, just a list of life hacks to make sure your neighbor doesn't hate you and you don't get fired. But the stated mission of our deep dive today, and what we really want to get into now, is to understand how applying these principles actually draws us closer to God. How do these social dynamics translate into spiritual trust?
Well, that requires us to look back at the very foundation of the text. The chapter begins by establishing God as the originator of this wisdom. Remember, it is the glory of God to conceal a thing.
Yes.
This implies that the intricate, delicate rules of human interaction weren't just invented by ancient societies to keep the peace. They were designed by the Creator. He wove these behavioral realities into the fabric of the universe, much like the laws of physics.
So when we talk about a soft tongue breaking a bone, or the destructive nature of vinegar upon niter, these aren't just good ideas someone came up with. They are the physical laws of the social universe.
Exactly. And because God authored these laws, the text explicitly promises sign backing when you follow them. When discussing feeding your enemy and heaping coals of fire, the proverb didn't say, and your enemy will definitely apologize and become your best friend.
Right, it doesn't guarantee a perfect social outcome.
No, it said, and the Lord shall reward thee. God is actively watching and actively backing the person who chooses restraint.
If God's wisdom works so perfectly for everyday awkwardness, like knowing exactly when to leave a neighbor's house or understanding the structural damage of relying on a flaky person, it really proves that he intimately understands human nature.
He really
He
does.
gets our social anxiety. He gets our workplace drama. And if we can trust his design for the small, awkward social dynamics, it lays the groundwork for trusting him with the grand trajectory of our lives.
Which brings us to the hardest part of this entire framework, what trusting God actually looks like in practice. Because applying these proverbs requires us to relinquish a massive amount of control.
It does. Think about what we are being asked to give up here. We are asked to give up our need to self-promote. We are asked to give up our desire to publicly defend ourselves when our reputation is attacked. We are asked to give up our right to exact revenge on someone who has actively harmed us.
And that is terrifying to modern sensibilities.
Yeah.
Our culture preaches self-reliance above all else. We are taught that if you don't defend yourself, no one will. So giving up the right to publicly clear your name and instead choosing to debate privately, that requires a profound leap of faith.
You are intentionally leaving yourself seemingly vulnerable in the human realm, trusting that the divine realm has you covered.
That is the essence of it. It requires you to believe that God is your ultimate defender. When you refuse to elevate yourself in the presence of the king, taking the lower seat, you are trusting that God is the one who ultimately promotes and demotes. When you refuse to blast your opponent on social media, you are trusting that God's justice is far superior to the court of public opinion.
It's relying on the walls he built, rather than frantically trying to build our own. We talked earlier about the person without self-control being like an unwalled city.
Yes.
When we obey these ancient principles of restraint, we are essentially allowing God's design for human flourishing to act as the walls of our lives. His wisdom becomes our protection.
Beautifully said. Every time you choose a soft tongue instead of a biting remark, you are actively exercising faith. Every time you remain a faithful messenger in a difficult situation, you are aligning your character with his. You aren't just following a rule. You are participating in the divine order. You are proving in real time that his way actually works.
And honestly, it takes so much pressure off us. I don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be secure. I don't have to seek out my own glory, which, as the text reminded us, is like eating way too much honey and making yourself sick anyway. I can just rest in the restraint.
Restraint is so often viewed by our culture as weakness. We view silence as complicity or a lack of confidence or an inability to compete. But Proverbs 25 flips that paradigm entirely. Restraint is the ultimate proof of strength.
Wow, yeah.
It is the proof that you are secure enough in your relationship with the divine, that you don't need to force the hands of humans.
The teachings of Proverbs 25 really show us that true wisdom is revealed through that restraint. Humility, thoughtful speech, emotional discipline. These aren't just ancient manners, they are spiritual tools. They build lasting respect with the people around us, and more importantly, they deepen our reliance on God. By trusting his methods for handling conflict and communication, we prove that we trust him with our ultimate well-being.
It is a daily, sometimes hourly practice, choosing the apples of gold and pictures of silver over the clouds and wind without rain.
It really is. And before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We spent a lot of time on the very first verse we discussed. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing. We applied that to investigating facts and restraining our assumptions. But what if we applied that concept of concealed glory to our own virtues?
Oh, that opens up an entirely new dimension.
Doesn't it? We live in a world of performative posting, where every good deed, every charitable donation, every personal victory is immediately broadcasted for public consumption. We strip the mystery out of our own lives.
We really do.
But if it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, perhaps there is immense untapped spiritual power in keeping your own goodness hidden. What if you did something incredibly generous this week and intentionally made sure absolutely no one ever found out about it?
A fascinating challenge to our modern ego.
It really is. Well, we've extracted the wisdom, we've mapped it to the modern day, we've seen how it connects us to the Creator. The only thing left to ask is, how will you apply this information in your life?